everyone, welcome to Story with Blue Lady, where stories are more than just words, they're a journey. Whether you're here for education, entertainment, or a bit of both, there's always something special for you. Today's story is The Time Freezer Watch. Max was an ordinary teenager, always curious and adventurous, living in a small town where nothing much ever happened. That is until one rainy afternoon when he found himself bored, rummaging through his late grandfather's old chest in the attic. Among the dusty trinkets and faded photographs, Max discovered something extraordinary, an antique watch unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its design was intricate, almost alien, with strange, glowing symbols engraved on its surface that seemed to pulse with energy. Max's heart raced as he held the watch in his hand. There was something about it, something that whispered secrets of forgotten times. Without thinking, he slipped it onto his wrist. Instantly, a jolt of electricity shot through him, making the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The watch felt warm, almost alive, as if it had been waiting for him all along. Later that day, Max found himself running late for school, dodging through the crowded streets of the town. The rain had cleared, but the streets were slick, and people were bustling about, lost in their own worlds. In his haste, Max accidentally pressed a hidden button on the watch. Suddenly, the world around him shifted. The bustling streets, the honking cars, the rustling leaves, all came to a standstill. Everything was frozen in time, except for Max. Max stood in the middle of the street, heart pounding. The world around him was eerily silent. He waved his hand in front of a frozen cyclist, expecting them to snap out of it, but they remained motionless. He touched a raindrop suspended in midair, feeling its coolness before it resumed its descent when time unfroze. In awe, Max realized that the watch could stop time, but only for 10 seconds. It was as if the world gave him a brief pause, a moment to breathe and think in the chaos of life. In the days that followed, Max experimented with his newfound power. He tested its limits, discovering that the 10 seconds of frozen time felt like an eternity, yet vanished in the blink of an eye. He used the watch for harmless pranks, like sneaking an extra snack or moving his teacher's chalk mid-sentence. But with every use, Max felt a growing sense of responsibility. The watch wasn't just a toy, it was something far more powerful, and with that power came a heavy burden. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Max received a frantic call from his best friend, Jake. Jake had unwittingly gotten into trouble with a group of older, notorious kids from a nearby school. They were known for their cruelty, and now they had cornered Jake in an alleyway, seeking revenge for some trivial slight. Max raced through the streets, his mind spinning. By the time he reached the alley, his heart sank. Jake was trapped, fear etched across his face, as the bullies closed in, their taunts echoing off the brick walls. Max knew he couldn't take on all of them alone, but he couldn't leave Jake to face them either. Suddenly, he felt the watch pulse on his wrist, as if urging him to act. Max glanced at it, the symbols glowing brighter than ever. With a deep breath, he pressed the hidden button. The world froze. The bullies were locked in mid-motion, fists raised, sneers frozen on their faces. Even the wind that had been howling through the alley stopped dead. Max had 10 seconds, just 10 seconds to change everything. He sprang into action, pulling Jake out of the bully's grip and dragging him behind a stack of crates at the far end of the alley. He scanned the area, spotting a rusty old ladder leading to the rooftop. Thinking quickly, Max shoved a garbage can into the path of the bullies, making it look like Jake had escaped over the fence. Then, he hurried back to his hiding spot just as time resumed. The bullies lunged forward, fists swinging, only to find empty air. They looked around, bewildered, as if Jake had vanished into thin air. Their confusion quickly turned to frustration as they began searching the alley, their eyes narrowing in suspicion. But Max and Jake remained hidden, hearts pounding in their chests. After a tense few moments, the bullies cursed and stormed off, leaving the alley empty and silent once more. Jake, still trembling, looked at Max with wide eyes. "How did you do that?" he whispered, his voice filled with awe and confusion. Max hesitated. He could tell Jake the truth about the watch, about the incredible power it held, but something inside him warned against it. Instead, he smiled, tapping the watch gently. "Just a bit of quick thinking and luck," he said, downplaying the extraordinary events. As they walked home under the darkening sky, Max couldn't shake the feeling that the watch. As days turned into weeks, Max found himself constantly aware of the watch on his wrist, its weight both literal and metaphorical. The thrill of freezing time had worn off, replaced by the growing realization that his power was something far more complex than he'd initially thought. Each time he used it, he felt the watch tugging at his conscience, as if it had a will of its own. It wasn't long before Max started to notice subtle changes around him. Whispers in the wind, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and a strange sensation of being watched. One evening, as Max sat alone in his room, flipping through his schoolbooks, he heard a faint ticking noise. At first, he dismissed it as the sound of his clock. But then it grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to fill the room. Max glanced around, his heart pounding, only to realize that the sound wasn't coming from any ordinary clock, it was coming from the watch. He looked down at his wrist and saw the symbols on the watch glowing faintly in the dim light. The ticking grew louder, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Max's pulse quickened as he hesitantly pressed the hidden button again. But this time, instead of freezing time, the world around him seemed to ripple, like a stone dropped into a pond. The walls of his room flickered, and for a brief moment, Max saw something, or someone, standing in the corner. It was a figure cloaked in shadows, tall and imposing, with eyes that gleamed like molten silver. Max's breath caught in his throat as the figure's gaze locked onto him, piercing through the darkness. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, and the room returned to normal. Max stumbled back, his mind racing. What had he just seen? Was it a hallucination, a trick of the light, or was it something far more sinister? He couldn't shake the feeling that the watch was connected to it, that whoever or whatever he had seen was tied to the strange power that now coursed through his life. Max began to dig deeper into the origins of the watch, scouring old libraries and online forums, searching for any clue that could explain its mysteries. One night, after hours of fruitless research, Max finally stumbled upon an ancient legend, a tale of a powerful artifact known as the Chronomancer's watch. According to the legend, the watch had been created centuries ago by a master of time magic, a being who had unlocked the secrets of time itself. But the Chronomancer had been cursed, trapped in a realm between worlds, and the watch had been lost to time. The legend warned that those who possessed the watch would gain control over time, but at a price. The watch would slowly bind itself to its wearer, drawing them closer to the Chronomancer's realm with each use. If they weren't careful, they would eventually become a part of that realm, lost to the world forever. Max felt a chill run down his spine. The figure he had seen, the one cloaked in shadows, was it the Chronomancer? Was the watch pulling him toward that dark realm? The thought terrified him, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the feeling that he was now part of something much larger, something he couldn't simply walk away from. As the days passed, Max started to notice more changes. The watch's power grew stronger, allowing him to stop time for longer periods. But with that power came strange visions, glimpses of other places, other times, where the Chronomancer's influence was felt. The shadowy figure began to appear more frequently, sometimes in his dreams, other times at the edge of his vision when time was frozen. Despite his fear, Max knew he couldn't stop using the watch. He had saved Jake once, and he knew there would be others who needed his help. But every time he used the watch, he could feel the Chronomancer's presence growing stronger, as if it were reaching out to him, pulling him closer. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Max heard a familiar voice cry out in distress. He turned to see a young girl, no older than 10, standing on the edge of the road, her eyes wide with terror. A car was speeding toward her, out of control, and there was no time to react. Without thinking, Max pressed the button on the watch. Time froze, and the world became eerily silent once more. He sprinted across the street, grabbing the girl and pulling her to safety just as the car skidded past, frozen in mid-crash. But as he looked around, Max noticed something different. The frozen world seemed darker, the shadows longer and more twisted. He felt a cold breeze brush past him, and in the corner of his eye, he saw the shadowy figure again, closer this time, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Max's heart raced as he hurried to the side of the road, placing the girl gently on the sidewalk. He could feel the Chronomancer's presence, stronger than ever, as if the act of saving the girl had drawn it closer. The ticking of the watch grew louder, almost deafening, as if it were counting down to something inevitable. He knew he couldn't stay in the frozen world any longer. With a deep breath, Max released the button, and time resumed. The car crashed into a nearby lamppost, the driver unharmed but shaken. The girl stared at Max in awe, her eyes wide with gratitude and confusion. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching his hand. Max smiled, though his mind was elsewhere. He could still feel the Chronomancer's presence, lingering at the edges of reality, waiting for its chance to pull him in. As he walked away, Max knew that his time with the watch was running out. The Chronomancer was growing stronger with each use, and soon, he would have to make a choice. Either find a way to break the watch's curse or risk being drawn into the dark realm forever. But until then, Max resolved to use his power to help those who needed it most, even if it meant facing the darkness that lurked in the shadows. For in those precious 10 seconds, he held the power to change lives, and he wasn't about to let that go to waste. Every story leaves us with something to think about. If you enjoyed today's journey, make sure to stick around. There's always more to explore, learn, and enjoy here. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your heart open to new stories.